Please welcome Jeff Harris, Chief Cybersecurity Operations, U.S. Small Business Administration, Denise Hill, Acting Deputy Chief Information Officer for Enterprise Policy, Portfolio Management and Governance, U.S. Department of Energy, John Evans, Chief Information Security Officer, State of Maryland, Andrew Marquardt, Chief Enterprise Architect, U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. To the stage for our panel discussion.
Hey, thanks for joining. Chris Townsend. Hey, man. Thanks for joining. Thank you for being here.
The panel will be moderated by Chris Townsend.
All right. Well, welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. To start things out, I'd love to just go around and get introductions, talk about the agencies you're representing and your role at the agency. So start here.
Okay, yeah, seems like the mic is working. Yeah, I was joking just quickly here. It's like I always try to avoid the first seat, but it always happens regardless. So yeah, my name is Jeff Harris, the Chief of Cybersecurity Operations at the Small Business Administration. If you're not familiar with SBA I like to categorize as like probably one of the biggest federal banks that exists. Its mission is all about providing loans, loan guarantees to small businesses all throughout the continental United States. And again, it's just the really kind of cornerstone of our economic society. So obviously my mission and the overall mission of the CIO's office is how do we enable that through secure and the most efficient and effective IT solutions that exist. We are a really kind of cloud-first, cloud-smart agency, and a lot of things we do are associated around that. So my group specifically, we focus on, again, the security aspects through our 24/7 Global Security Operations Center that has visibility into our 68-plus district offices around the United States, as well as our security engineering arm that performs not just a normal I would say development and engineering of a lot of those solutions, but we really like to focus a lot more of our energy on the innovation aspect as well. So that gets into a lot of automation, orchestration, and we really leverage the cloud heavily and perform in a lot of those activities. So thank you.
Great.
I'm John Evans. I am the State Chief Information Security Officer for the state of Maryland. I came into the role of the Chief Information Security Officer for the executive branch in October of last year, and then was made the first official State Chief Information Security Officer through an executive order about a month ago. I was appointed by Governor Hogan into that position. So prior to that, I was working for Maryland DHS as their Deputy CTO and CISO, leading a lot of the cloud transformation activities for the state of Maryland. It's in pockets we're fairly mature on our cloud adoption journey. Other areas we're not as mature. But my role now is mostly setting guidance, oversight, policy, mostly the governance side of things.
Great, thank you.
All right. So my name's Andrew Marquardt, and I am with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. And if you haven't heard of that, we're a small government agency that does water management for the western United States. So quick show of hands, who's been to the Hoover Dam? Thank you for chipping in on my salary. Be sure to go again. Yeah, so we own and operate the Hoover Dam. That's one of our more famous structures. And then we have a whole bunch of facilities all throughout the western United States doing the water management, like I said, as well as the accompanying power generation and management. So we have a unique IT environment where we operate in the normal government business environment, but we also operate essentially as a public utility as well. So it's interesting with that because we also participate in the National Critical Infrastructure Program as well. So sites like the Hoover Dam, things like that generate power. That's obviously critical infrastructure. So as a chief enterprise architect, I'll be kind of counterbalancing, I think, some of the technical aspects with a little bit more of the human aspects, like was alluded to in the last presentation. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. Denise?
Hi, Denise Hill, U.S. Department of Energy, and I have responsible for policy, capital planning and investment control, governance, project management, and a sundry of other cross-government initiatives. And what does that have to do with cyber? We work very hard to make sure that cyber is baked into everything we're doing. So, for example, our project management, we have baked cybersecurity and cybersecurity practices into our project management guidance and policies and practices. And on the inverse side, when our cyber organization is rolling out big projects like across their SOCs or anything, we participate in that effort from a project management perspective to make sure that we are doing things in a focused manner and helping them get to their end goals and giving another consideration to that. And also on the governance end, as cyber is developing policies, we work with cyber to develop those policies and think about things that need to be included so that it's not focused solely on controls. It has all the elements, including the human elements included in it, and then work across those different disciplines.
Well, thank you very much, Denise, and we'll kick things off with you, if that's okay. So where is Department of Energy in terms of its cloud adoption continuum? What percentage of their internal systems have they migrated to the cloud, and where are they on that cloud adoption journey?
And I feel like I always have to say it depends, because the Department of Energy is a rather large agency, and we have a lot of labs and we have a lot of different components. So some components in labs were early adopters and others not so much. So it's not a one-size-fits-all answer, but I can say that right now we're moving our headquarters desktop infrastructure to the cloud. And one of the things that we did was we took it slow and we took it easy with moving some early smaller applications into the cloud to make sure that they were fully functioning, that we kicked the tires on it, and then put together a schedule to move other more aggressive applications into the same cloud. But we wanted to start early, get some lessons learned, make some adjustments, and then schedule the next round.
Great. And just a follow-up question to that, with your security policy background, what lessons learned were there in terms of migrating those applications to the cloud, and how that affected cybersecurity approach and policy within the agency?
Okay, so we're moving our Albuquerque and Germantown data centers into the cloud. And one of the things was there are lessons learned, because you make an assumption that if it's FedRAMP certified and if it's already tried and true, that we can just zip, zam, boom, move the application and be done with it. Well, one of the lessons learned is that some of the tools are not inherently, because you're a cybersecurity person, does not mean that you're going to pick up the tool in the cloud and be able to use it as transparently as you thought you would be able to. So you have to figure out there's a training and a learning that has to go along with anything in the cloud. Just because it looks like the same box is not the same box. And taking some time to learn the tools and then do the knowledge transfer to other people as they're teed up to move their application into the cloud.
Yeah, I think a lot of customers in both government and non-government are realizing that just because it's FedRAMP or SOC 2 compliant doesn't mean that your data is any more protected than it is on-prem. It means that the cloud provider meets that minimum standard, but you still have to protect the data. You still have the responsibility of safeguarding your information and making sure that there's policies and systems around that to do that, right?
Right.
And again, Capital One, I think, is a good example of that. So thank you. So John, as our lone state representative, I'd love to get your perspective on where the state of Maryland is in terms of their cloud adoption and lessons learned that you've seen through that process.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So we have multiple production workloads running in the cloud now. We've primarily been making use of AWS cloud. We have some workloads that are also in GCP, not a lot in Azure at this time. We kind of focused on really maturing one cloud offering before we start moving into the others, but the goal would be that we would like to have a cloud offering across multiple environments so that we could move workloads as needed. We have our Maryland Office of Refugees and Asylees application up in the cloud. We just went live on with a limited set of users for our child welfare system a week or two ago. which was a big system. We have most of our Medicaid systems up in the cloud now. We're moving the final one of those next Monday. It's scheduled to move over, which is our Maryland Health Benefits Exchange. We're one of the few states in the nation, I think there's 13 of them left that don't use the federal health exchange. We use a state-based exchange. So that's moving in Monday. So our juvenile justice system is live. So we've got several workloads live as of right now. What you were talking about a little bit earlier has been what you were just talking about, I would say, in terms of that the SOC 2 compliance, FedRAMP, those types of things don't ensure security or compliance. That's one of the biggest sort of learning opportunities that we've had within the state is AWS calls it the shared responsibility model, and it kind of breaks out what they're responsible for versus what you're responsible for in terms of security. And then we've created, we haven't really rolled it out yet, but we have a draft ready of the Maryland shared responsibility model, which takes it a step further. So we've got the AWS shared responsibility model, and then we show those services that come kind of out of the box with a CIS baseline, basically that we put in for anyone looking to come into the cloud, and then we can adopt it after that. We have multiple environments depending on the level of security that is needed, but each of those goes higher up the stack or at a different level of the stack of that shared responsibility model. And that's been an extremely important concept to get people to understand as they're looking to move into the cloud. From a security perspective, I would say that's been maybe the most important thing, is getting people to understand what that looks like and where their roles and responsibilities are versus the responsibility of the cloud. So if anyone has any questions about how we've done that later, I'd be happy to help. But that I can tell you from a security perspective, that's probably been the most important thing that we've been trying to convey.
And are you pushing that same standard to your SaaS-based cloud applications as well? I know earlier we talked and you were using ServiceNow or Office 365. Are you using that same shared responsibility model in the SaaS offerings in addition to the IaaS platform, or are you taking a bit of a different approach there?
So for the SaaS offerings, it's a little bit different. On the cloud platform piece, it's the infrastructure as a service is certified, and then it's certified with whatever those certifications are, the SOC or the FedRAMP or FISMA, but as you move up the stack, you get more into platform as a service and some of those other areas, even to where the state is providing somewhat of software as a service in terms of microservices that we'll provide to the other agencies. But on the software as a service side, we'll look for the certifications more than trying to come in and do our own assessment. So part of the reason we created the shared responsibility model was to get us to that point of an ATO, so that the agencies could understand, as they're putting their applications in, which pieces of the SSP are they responsible for to get them to an ATO. But on the SaaS side, we don't really try to ATO third-party SaaS solutions. So we don't really break down the shared responsibility model quite as granular. It's just we rely more on those certifications across the stack. So let's say that there was an application that was being hosted in AWS. We were receiving a software as a service. We would want to see some certification for the AWS platform, for the infrastructure that they were using, as well as some certification like a SOC 2 audit report for the application pieces that the vendor is now managing. So as long as all of it's covered by some sort of the certification or accreditation report, we don't really try breaking it out. I can only think of one application that one software as a service application that we actually went in and did an ATO on, and they basically paid my office to come in and do it because it was a small company, they weren't prepared for it. So
got it. Andrew, where's BOR on its cloud adoption migration?
So I think, like everybody, the answer is stages, fits and starts and stops and redirects and everything that's happened. And as technology's changed, we've really tried to adjust with that. But I think the important thing to think about is that with BOR, over the last year to 2 years, what's really been going on is we really stopped, kind of realized we had time for our adoption, engaged our management, took a step back and really tried to understand what the truly transformative nature of moving to the cloud. Because when you really think about it, you're not just moving your infrastructure and all your services from on-prem to up into the cloud where everybody gets everything all the time, right? Okay, technically that's what's happening, but really you're talking about, and I think this is the most important thing to stress, is you're really talking about an opportunity for cultural transformation within your organization. The way you do business is really going to change. And so one thing that we were able to do was we went through and we stopped looking at the normal lift and shift. Okay, let's look at the whole landscape. Let's look at what systems we need to get up into the cloud. How are we going to rebuild them? Yeah, we know how to do that. That's pretty blueprinted at this point. What we looked at is we looked at work systems. So what's a work system? So a work system is any combination of automated, manual, semi-automated processes that you use to accomplish work. So somebody takes a physical form, goes through the office, checks off whatever, say, let's talk application inventory, or like hardware, not applications, like computers, the inventory, right? How many people have to deal with somebody walking around once a year and go with a physical print off, check, and then that gets put into the computer and all of that? Well, that's a work system, right? So what we looked at was how can the cloud really transform our work systems? And how many work systems does any work group actually have? Turns out the answer is probably small ones, 3 to 5, large ones, upwards of 9, sometimes 15. So you're really talking about huge transformation in that sense. And when you were able to do that, and when we've been able to do that and really automate a lot of those work systems and take advantage of the cloud and open them up so people can do things from their phones or tablets or whatever, we've seen tremendous efficiencies come up. And using the cloud systems that are secured on the platform, you're designing business solutions to meet your work systems, to meet your needs, and you're doing it in a secure way. So that's really what we did. And the way to really do that, and this is probably the key takeaway, is stop designing for average users. That they don't exist. You don't have an average user. That is a total myth. Design for your fringes. You design absolutely for your fringes. And at Reclamation, we have use cases, and I don't even like calling them use cases, but we have realities where we have people that are literally going to sites that they have to take either Jeeps in the summer or snowshoes in the winter to access stuff. There's no cell signal up there. There's no Wi-Fi up there. So we had to make sure we were tailoring a lot of our solutions for things like inspections to actually work online, offline, in low bandwidth environments. And if we designed those kinds of solutions with an average user in mind, we would have missed that whole thing. And all of our cloud adoption, from a cultural perspective, would have been, who cares? This thing doesn't work when I need it for the guy that has to snowshoe up the mountain, right? So I know those are extreme examples, but they're really not, especially with anybody that's working in the defense industry. That's a pretty common design. So that's really where we are kind of there. And I really want to emphasize that how much, if you're standing back and you're designing for, let's go for the average, you're missing it. You're really missing an opportunity for that. So I really encourage you to take a look at who's really using this stuff and how they're doing it, and orient your designs to those what you would consider the fringe or the extreme. Those marginalized communities are really where you need to be doing the work to have a successful modernization.
That's great insight in terms of the cloud benefit to the business process and workflow and the agility of the cloud. So Jeff, it sounds like in your introduction, SBA is maybe quite a bit ahead of most agencies in terms of your cloud adoption and leveraging the agility of the cloud in your environment. So how do you balance the security controls with the full agility that Andrew spoke of and the promise of the cloud, the direct-to-net access to applications from mobile devices, government furnished, non-government furnished? How do you strike that security balance?
I really think it's a perspective. One of the things and I think we could all probably agree with this to some extent, is, whether we're talking about the cloud or just kind of traditional how IT has been from an on-premise environment, I mean, there's risk associated with everything, right? So now, instead of focusing on whether it's the risk of the management of the solution or, again, our ability to properly have certain levels of visibility or protect against certain types of things, we see now that, hey, a lot of those things the cloud will natively provide for us, so we can transfer those risks into more appropriate areas to where we really look at those being more of the data aspect, right? Where is our data? Who actually has access to it? Does our data actually mean anything to us? I think, again, that's another thing that as we really shifted and transitioned more to the cloud environment, we just had a significant amount of data, and it came to this point, what does this data really mean? Is it useful, right? Is there a need for it? And then get into just other conversations about retention, so on and so on. So again, when we really start focusing on our risk and associated with our cloud environment, it's really things that really have some meaning within the environment. I could even take that a step further to say, right now today, and this has probably just happened within the last couple of months, we started an enterprise security services onboarding initiative to where we set up, and it's kind of very similar to the earlier conversation, a set of core key kind of security services that should be available to all of our FISMA systems within all of our different program offices. And since doing that, we usually went from somewhere in the neighborhood of like 30 gigs a day of data to 400 gigs a day of data we're processing right now, right? So it's a significant amount, further into that whole risk conversation, and really trying to get some clear picture of what that is. But we have a level of visibility that we've never had before. I mean, ever just at the facility of probably any government organization that I've been part of. But it's just really now, again, how do we really kind of make sense of that? We do, and this also goes to the earlier conversation when we talk about the vendor kind of government relationship. We not only kind of pride ourselves in the relationship that we have with our vendors, but we understand that, again, and us having to not take on so much of the risk and the management associated with the on-premise environment, that not only, again, can we focus more, but they are taking a lot of that weight off of us. They probably have more skin and teeth in the game than we ever would in kind of managing those environments. So again, it's all really about true risk transfer, who has the responsibility of the risk. And the more we really slice and dice that, we understand that our role is just really specific around the data and how we manage that aspect of it.
So you've taken advantage of this cloud migration to get better visibility and better categorize your data to be able to take a more of a risk-based approach in how you're allocating your resources and indexing the data, protecting the data where the data resides.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about sometimes low level or low value and high value work. Traditionally, right, we would have had, and if we just talk about from a SOC perspective, easily somewhere in the neighborhood of 20, 30 people kind of monitoring, eyes on glass type thing. And again, it's like, what is the real kind of return on investment you're getting from that type of activity? Yep. Now, the cloud and just the native capabilities that exist within that, we're easily able to sift down from those number of individuals to about maybe 2 individuals per shift. And the cloud, just with its native AI machine learning capabilities, we have the ability to determine activity that, again, that is just not really kind of normal. One of those examples is right now today, a policy in SBA is that if you go on any type of foreign travel, personal or official business, you can't take your SBA equipment there, whether it's phone or your laptop. That type of activity, we don't have to have awareness of anyone doing it. There has to be no prior coordination, even though that's required per agency policy. The second it hits a certain cell tower, our tools automatically alert us to that information. And it's not just simply down to, hey, that there's a user over here in this location, but it's how long they've been there, and then it does historical trending analysis against that user and how often they travel to areas. So again, it's just the insight that will take analysts a certain amount of time to really figure that out. We minimize down to literally a number of seconds, and we just kind of wait for that information to come back to us. So, a lot of that work before would have a lot of analysts really trying to dig down to that. We can now take more of our time, more of our efforts, to more of the high value work. So again, how can we really kind of automate? How can we really kind of bring potentially other sources into that to get even a true and better visibility picture?
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. John, how about you? State of Maryland and leveraging or realizing the agility of the cloud, but balancing that with the security controls.
Yeah, so that's definitely there. When we got one of the big things for us was being able to make significant progress right off the bat we were taking advantage of, I don't know if anyone's familiar with the A87 cost allocation methods and then the waiver that was issued for those states that were implementing their own health benefits exchange. But basically, the 87 cost allocation waiver, or the 87 cost allocation method talks about how you have to split costs between different federal agencies as you're developing a common platform, like a common cloud platform that's going to be shared by different services across the state that are partially funded by, either partially or fully funded by the federal government. The cost allocation waiver basically said that you don't have to do any of that. If anything touches Medicaid, you can bill it all at 90% to the federal government. So when we got our funding, it was beginning of 2018, February of 2018, and the cost allocation waiver expired December 31st, 2018. So there was a huge push from the state government to be able to get things in as fast as possible, be able to show time to value as fast as possible, have the infrastructure set up by the end of December. So there was a lot of tension at some points between trying to move fast to be able to take advantage of that funding source, but at the same time make sure that everything was done securely. I think we did a very good job of working with the development teams. Specifically, I'm talking here about application, but for these purposes, it was mostly the infrastructure development teams, those teams that were setting up the infrastructure. We would embed people with them. It was almost kind of almost like one team, even though we were providing the oversight. It was very incremental. As we would go, we would feed them what the requirements were for different pieces. We would validate as we went along the way. That way, when we got to the end, it wasn't like we had to go through a full ATO process that would take months after the infrastructure was built. So that was one of the things I think that we did to be able to show time to value, and it was really about the collaboration. One of the things, I just came back a few weeks ago from the NASCIO leadership. The NASCIO is the National Association of State CIOs. Came back from the NASCIO leadership forum in San Antonio, and one of the CISOs over there, one of the state CISOs, was complaining, saying that she throws requirements over to her operations team that comes back a month later and nothing's done. I'm like, well, so I kind of said, I don't know if I made a friend on that day, but I kind of said it in front of the other CISOs. Well, yeah, no wonder you're just throwing it over to them with no collaboration or coordination going on in between. Of course, you're having issues getting these things done. That doesn't make any sense. So I would say the reason I mentioned that is going back to what I was saying earlier. I would say one of the things that really helped us with being able to move fast in a secure manner, show time to value quickly, was that collaboration along the way, every step, and being able to do things incrementally and in parallel rather than looking at more of a phase gate type of approach.
That's fantastic. So far consistent in terms of change in business process and workflow to facilitate cloud adoption and to leverage the agility, but also do it in a secure manner. That's fantastic. Denise, I know that Department of Energy, having worked with the Department of Energy in the past, that's a unique environment often in the federal space. There's a lot of research and innovation and a lot of affiliations with universities and educational environments that requires some very open environments, but you also have some really classified stuff you guys work on. So how do you strike that balance between the flexibility and the agility of the cloud and making sure that you're secure?
Well, one of the things that we're working on, and the Chief Data Officer and the Chief Technology Officer are the same person, and she's working on standing up a sandbox so that people can come in and actually deploy their applications, showcase their solutions, and bring other people in to see what's going on, test out the vulnerabilities, test out the security in the sandbox environment so that people can go off and do their thing in their production environment. And that's agnostic of if you're open science or if you're not. So that's just one of the things that we're trying to do to bridge that gap between university and the open collaboration and the closed, because then people can actually come in and see the difference between the security controls needed. Because one of the things that we said, what we understand is that energy really tries to be collaborative, but we try to be agile and we try to be risk-based in our approach to security. a lot of times people who work in the closed environment and need those tighter security controls don't speak the language that the people in the open environment, they just say, oh, you just want to throw that in there with no security. The sandbox is an opportunity to come and see the controls and how that risk is managed in a neutral environment. And that helps bring the conversation to a common language. Great.
So you're not only showcasing the cloud application, but showcasing how you're going to secure that cloud application and make it available. That's fantastic. So as you migrate to the cloud, you obviously have a lot of legacy on-prem applications as well. So Andrew, we'll go with you. So how do you strike the balance of maintaining your on-prem security controls and then the cloud security controls without adding additional complexity? All of our customers that we talk to, Dan hit on it earlier. You've got a ton of tools. It's already a pretty complex environment. We're already not necessarily using the resources as efficiently as we could be. So how do you go to the cloud without making your environment more complex in terms of an operations standpoint?
It's a great question, Chris. And I think when we abstract it, it comes down from an architecture perspective. When we kind of abstract that thought, it's the tension between security and usability is ultimately kind of what you're starting to describe, and then where we're actually going to physically put those resources. So just give me a minute, guys. If you had to take a choice and you had to choose one or the other, security or usability, who's on the side of security? Show of hands. Like 1, 2, 3 people. Who's on the side of usability? All right, more people. Some abstention. All right. All right. No, I think that demonstrates the point, right? Is that there's a lot of apprehension to be able to choose because it is a tough decision. But the reality is you can have both. You really can. And I think a lot of the cloud tools are providing that. And the way that that's happening, to answer your question a little bit more directly, is look at your common business functions. Really take a step back, do a functional analysis a year of your enterprise, or look at your work systems through a work systems analysis, and really figure out what's common, what's pretty low level, and then get that stuff up into the cloud. Make the data secure. Get it up there. Make it secure. Allow the exchanges to be secured and monitored. As long as people agree to, as long as your business units agree to that, you're going to be successful. And then there truly is going to be stuff that just is never going to happen that's going to come up. I mentioned, reclamation is part of the national critical infrastructure. That stuff is never going into the cloud. It's going to exist where it exists, and it's just going to have to. So pick and choose, look at your functions, look at your work systems, and then you have to just be smart about it. And you will have to go through negotiations with your business units, and someone's going to win, someone's going to lose, honestly. So that's how you get there.
That's fantastic. Jeff, same question to you. As you move into the cloud and you're adding these additional cloud security controls, you're extending your on-prem controls into the cloud. How do you balance that with your on-prem and not get cost overruns or additional operational complexity that I think all agencies are struggling with today, just managing their on-prem environment in many cases?
Right. So one of the things that we look at, and I can tell kind of a little bit of a story associated with this. I've been with SBA here almost a year. Most of our kind of senior leadership within the CIO office, going on max 2 years. It's had a lot of transition prior to that. When our CIO came in, we had over 36 different security tools, which obviously, like in most organizations, right, you're using a percentage of each and not as full kind of capability. We're down to about 5 tools that we use on a recurring basis, and all of those are cloud-based tools. All right, so, and it kind of goes back to that perspective aspect. Today, right, if we wanted to, perform any kind of security-related function, at the end of the day, again, it's not about the kind of intent of what the tool has the ability to do, but the outcome it can produce. All right, so when we look at, cloud kind of native type capabilities, we say, well, hey, I know what I need at the end of the day. It's not about how I get there. And we find, again, across the suite that we utilize, it gives us that kind of visibility and a lot more. So then what that easily helps transition to is, again, when we look at our on-premise environment and then within our cloud environment, it's just about, we know what our requirement is. We already know where we're at and where we're going. What are those solutions that help kind of tie and connect those all together in the ecosystem that we want to have? A really good example of that is we recently concluded a pilot, beginning of June, with DHS, if anyone ever's had the ability to, or opportunity to hear some of our leadership like Maria Road or Guy Cavallo talk at things, you'll hear different things from our TIC pilot with DHS, but our most recent one was with CDM. So it's kind of the same thing. I think most people in here either utilize or very familiar with CDM and its capabilities. Again, we're really looking at that kind of more outcome-driven approach to it. We utilize our same cloud security capabilities that we use within our SOCs and other areas today. And through those things and all the data that we collect, we were able to basically replicate and meet the intent of all the CDM requirements with those cloud native tools. And there was no data that we had to push to a federal dashboard. Again, looking at a more agnostic approach, no tool specific. We were able to basically make that data visibility in a various number of forms. Ours was utilizing a kind of Power BI kind of driven approach. But what that really helped do, again, it helps show that, again, these tools have an immersed kind of capability and functionality to them. And again, it's like with any of the on-premise tools that existed before, it's really how we kind of tap into those. And that's not to say that the on-premise capabilities aren't great today. They still have some visibility. There are certain things that we still use within our product suite. But again, we don't look at it as kind of, again, where we've been. It's all about where we want to go to, and it's about those two worlds really kind of colliding.
So it's an interesting, consistent theme is that you're using the migration to cloud to consolidate, simplify, and really modernize your approach to security. So John, are you seeing the same thing at the state level?
Yeah, so just really quick too, in case this is being recording, my boss to see, I raised my hand. I thought I was more on the side of operations there. That's just because I view my role. I view my role very much as being able to get to a place of yes in terms of the functionality, not to not to cut it off. So
and that seems like it's been consistent as well, which is really refreshing. It's not about locking down, but how do we make these systems most available and leverage the promise of the agility and improved productivity of the cloud, but doing so with the appropriate security controls and understanding the risks and building policy to do that. So that's fantastic. But sorry, I didn't mean to
no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify that. But yes, we've definitely been looking at the migration to the cloud as an opportunity. For us, it's less, I would say, an opportunity between, so you were talking about kind of streamlining operations and tool usage between on-prem versus in the cloud. I would say the bigger opportunity for us in the state is hopefully to consolidate security processes and tools across the different silos that exist in the state. So as we look to modernize, right now we've got, I don't know, it depends on how you count it. I'm always told, I've heard some people say I'm in charge of 67 agencies, some say 74, I don't know. But everyone's kind of doing, there's not a consistent way that people are doing things. There's not a consistent tool set that people are leveraging. For the first time, we've really started kicking off some of the enterprise licensing agreements with some of the different vendors to be able to try to get something that's a lower cost that's going to save the state money. I mean, I can tell you we've only done it with a couple tools so far, and on one tool across just a handful of agencies, we're saving six figures. So. Wow. So, I mean, there's literally the opportunity if we can get especially some of the larger agencies into using common tool sets, there's the opportunity to save the state millions of dollars.
Yeah, that's fantastic. No, thank you. So I got the 5-minute sign, so we're going to do the wrap-up question. So Denise, if there's one piece of advice you have for the audience in terms of mitigating cyber risk and taking advantage of the cloud based on where DOE is today, what would that be?
I think we've said it a couple times in different ways, is use an agile approach and take small pieces at a time, do your lessons learned, and I want to put a pitch in for utilizing your governance, because I didn't get to talk about governance, but utilizing governance, because that's where you get a lot of the collaboration.
Did you stand up like an internal cloud migration panel that had representatives from different functional areas to do that? Is that the
Well, we have different layers of governance. So the chief technology officer is looking at this and developed the cloud smart policy through the architecture review board and the EA governance board. And we have different governance depending on the different topics. So we have governance around our SOCs.
Got it. Great. Andrew, same question.
I'm just going to stress the point that when you're design for your marginal communities, the if you do that average design, you're just going to fail every time, because there is no such thing as an average user. So make sure you're designing and considering those marginalized communities. That's really where you need to be.
John?
So I'm going to kind of take off the security hat for a second. Prior to being on the security side, I was, for a while, I was in charge of the cloud migration for the state on the operations side. And I'll say, make sure that you're achieving the goals that you want to as you move into the cloud. There was a lot of people, a lot of agencies in the state that wanted to do a simple lift and shift into the cloud. We determined that wasn't a great way to do things for most of our use cases in the state. We would be losing out on the opportunity, like you were saying, some opportunities in order to look at business process re-engineering. We'd be continuing to accrue more technical debt, even though we were moving into the cloud, because our applications were being outdated. We wouldn't be able to leverage a lot of the CSP native offerings because our systems weren't set up for it. We'd be back into the same paradigm of supporting duplicative functionality, because we couldn't make use of things like containerization and microservices. So we decided it was, in almost all cases that we've done evaluation on, worth doing a rebuild of the applications versus doing a lift and shift to get away from all of those issues. And I'll say that in other places where I've seen them do lift and shift, I can tell you, talking to some of their senior leadership, they've been less than satisfied with a lot of their cloud adoption, because they haven't seen the types of things that they were expecting. If your application wasn't built for it, if you move into, let's say you use like a VMware, for instance, to move into the cloud, well, now you can't auto scale. There's no auto scaling available. So you're not making. Why are you even moving into the cloud at that point? You're not leveraging the CSP offerings. You're not auto scaling. You're not reusing functionality and code base. You're not. I mean,
it just becomes an outsourced data center.
Yeah, it's like, why are you even doing it? Yeah. So I would say really think about what you're trying to achieve, and I would very much take a really hard look at anyone who is recommending a lift and shift. I haven't seen it work very, 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 very well across most agencies, I'll say.
Great, thank you. All right, Jeff, same question.
Yeah.
One piece of advice.
I would actually say, and it definitely kind of takes in points from my colleagues here, but kind of goes off in a wild way like I do. I would say actually probably take more risk, but ensure those risks are calculated. And what I mean by that is, when I first walked into SBA, and my background is primarily the Department of Defense intelligence community, where things are very structured, very intentional kind of type things. There's lots of yelling and all of those things, right? That's how they show you love, right? So SBA was a completely different environment, and it was different in a great way, to where it was a very risk-tolerant organization. It really reminds me, even to this day, of probably being at a Google or something. We're very agile focused. There's things all on the walls everywhere. People, right? That's the kind of mentality they even kind of operate in. And what it allows us to do is really kind of take advantage of a lot of the ideas and creativity folks have. And we know the things that we can be more than comfortable with trying. Someone messes up, hey, it's not a big deal. We'll figure this out, because again, I think it goes back to the same perspective of, hey, we can stay in this kind of same environment, the same mindset we are now within this on-premise world, and we'll continue to just probably overthink certain things, right? There's always risk. We always know that we have to address risk, but if we wait for things to be kind of fully figured out, right, there'll be some other technology that then kind of comes along that we're then trying to figure that out. So again, we take very calculated risks and saying the things that we're more than comfortable with, let's just give it a try, and give it a try based off what we know now. And then for the other things, hey, you can figure it out. You can figure it out over time, but don't wait till you know it all. Just go with what you know.
Excellent. Well, thank you all very much. That was fantastic.